Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to Old School World of Tanks. That's right, I'm on the 0.7.0 semi-April Fool's, semi-classic test server that Wargaming have put out. I had the pleasure, I'd say overall pleasure of playing it on Friday, but boy, have Wargaming really screwed up the release. They wanted to release it, I think, at 8 AM on Friday, and it was pretty much about 5 or 6 in the evening until you could manage to get on. And yep. What's that noise you might be saying? Well, that is the old school noise for people clicking the map. And we're actually playing on a map that, unless you've been playing the game for a few years, you will have never seen this one before. This is called Swamp. And on Swamp, pretty simple layout really, based in the northeast, based in the northwest. It's pretty much a mirror map, although there are some differences. For example, the northeast team could push over towards this location. Now, if you've played Swamp recently, you'd be quite confused with the lack of some of the hills allowing you to be able to really get across certain locations. And I am playing again in there's so much to talk about here. I'm playing in the Tier 5 American top-tier light tank, the Chaffee. And that's because back in the day in 2011, this was the top light tank along with the T-52, which we just vanquished on the enemy team, but another competitor is going to be stepping up. Now, one thing that is for sure is that the game engine back then was so unbelievably clunky, and Wargaming servers were so darn laggy on Friday that it's really hard to actually be able to hit your opponents unless they're sitting still, or you're sitting still and you've got all the time in the world to be able to aim at them. Another thing that's really weird is that there's no dynamic camera inside the sniper mode, so there's no vertical stabilization. So what that means is that unless you sit completely still, it's actually incredibly hard to snipe at your opponents. But I'm in my environment right now. I'm playing on old school maps that I played in 2011. I know the kind of positions that I probably want to pick up, and I know all of the opportunities that we can get against our opponents, and I'm playing one of the best tanks ever in the game, the Tier 5 Chaffee. This thing, with its little 76mm main armament, actually has more damage on its standard rounds. Look at that, look at the bottom of the screen. 115 damage on its standard rounds and enough penetration, 137. On its premium rounds, it's actually got less damage, 110 and 185mm of penetration. And that wasn't really a standard back then. Wargaming didn't really have standard ammunition doing more damage than premium ammunition, but it's just a bit of a funny little Easter egg, I guess, on the Chaffee. Oh god, look how bad my aiming is. I really can't get used to the lag that I was having, and even though it's saying that my ping was 32, my budget was 32. Do you notice how all the shell traces are completely different back in the day? And I'm going to be showing you that as I'm going to be playing some artillery gameplay in a second, hopefully as we finish off this M41. No, we actually don't manage to finish off somebody called Kahana in the M41 on the enemy team. We're going to have to see whether that comes back and manages to shut us down. Actually, it wasn't the M41. We see it was a guy called Mackay who actually took me out. And yet artillery was very unforgiving back then, especially against light tanks. Artillery pretty much had no splash radius, but if they hit you, boy did they hurt you, because they had monster penetration. In fact, the Tier 5 American artillery had a gun that was pretty much the same as the KV-2 with regards to penetration and alpha damage. And while it did practically no damage to you if it missed you and splashed you, if it did hit you, you really weren't looking forward to the effects. One thing that's also bizarre about playing on the test server is remembering what Wargaming's matchmaking was like. Yeah, a lot of people complain about +2, -2 matchmaking these days. Yeah, these are Tier 4 light tanks having to deal with Tier 8 vehicles on the enemy team. This is a 4-tier spread game. And back in the day, if you were playing in a Tier 3 tank, I think you used to have to deal with Tier 6 or Tier 7 tanks. If you were playing in a Tier 6 tank, you'd have to deal with Tier 10 tanks on the enemy team. And of course, gold rounds were only for gold. You could not purchase premium ammunition. And this is the reason why they've always been called gold rounds, for credits. And so unless you literally got your credit card out, or you managed to win gold in some kind of competition, or most likely on the Clan Wars map, then you couldn't afford to fire premium rounds in the game without actually paying. Outrageous stuff. And this T-32 at the end is feeling the effect of this matchmaking, as it's just taking our team so blooming long to be able to shut him down. It looks like the artillery are actually the ones who are dealing the damage over the hills here. Maybe this KV-1S. That is a Tier 6 Soviet heavy tank with pretty much the gun of a Tier 7 Soviet heavy tank, the IS. The KV-1S, probably one of the most overpowered tanks tier for tier in the game. The reason why I'm waiting this one out and stalling is because I want to show you what the post-game stats used to look like back in the day. There wasn't a complicated breakdown of the amount of damage that you dealt to all of the different enemy vehicles. It was as simple as number of kills, experience you get, the credits, and the repairs of your tank as to how much you were going to lose, especially if you weren't running a premium account back then. With the knowledge that I had of the game, I was absolutely terrible. And quite often, once I got to my high-tier vehicles, I was hemorrhaging a lot of credits because I was a free-to-play player for the first half year I played this game. And it would have been in 2011, right? And you get to see your personal achievements as to who specifically you destroyed, who specifically you damaged, but obviously no indicator of how much you dealt to them, who you detected, and then there's this battle heroes section as well, showing you who got the best medals.
Let's get this show on the road.
But let's get a little bit filthy, and why not just talk about, why should I only talk about the M41? Why don't I just show you what artillery used to be like back in the game? And immediately, check out this right here. This is all chat. You could speak to the enemy team. Again, look at this +4 matchmaking, and for some reason it doesn't even really bother me. I tell you what, I would love to be the T28 on the enemy team or the IS-3 on this team, but I don't know. The one thing that you will have all experienced if you've been playing on the classic server is the instant queue times. You don't have to wait at all. You literally click it and it's loading the battle, preparing you to get in one. And I guess it was because the matchmaker was literally just throwing tanks in left, right and center. Sometimes the tiers didn't even really match up, and let's see if that has been the case here. Actually, it pretty much looks bang on. Tier 6s against tier 6s. Well, actually, here's a mismatch. The enemy have got 3 tier 6 tanks, and we only have 2 tier 6 tanks. Sorry, they've actually got an extra tier 7, but we've got an extra tier 6. So I guess it kind of balances out a little bit like that. But one thing I want to show you here are the traces that used to happen with artillery. You're about to see some crazy fireworks. Look at this. Look at all the artillery on the enemy team. 5, because you could have 5 artillery back then. Look at them all firing left, right, and center. Pew, pew, pew. Some of them literally stacking up alongside each other. And there you go. I managed to actually fire there, and I shut down the SU-8 with the clear traces on the enemy team. And it was ludicrous stuff, really, back then, that if you were to counter battery enemy artillery, it could be really effective at doing so. And it meant that artillery had to be really safe. Now, one thing that's interesting about this fight here is that clearly that light tank, he's appearing on the minimap, but we're not actually in radio communication. So while I can see that there's a light tank on the minimap, he's not actually radioing in where the artillery are spotted. And so this was a rather annoying part of the game for me, because I realized I was playing with a stock radio on this tank and I was unable to get the positions of these enemy artillery to be able to shoot them. So all I can really do is rely on the tracers. But they're all dying. I'm looking at the T-52 like, what? Why aren't you radioing in the shots, bud? I tell you what, I've had a hell of a lot of fun just rushing in light tanks into the enemy's positions. And back then, okay, now here's one thing that I really want to talk about in this video, the difference with artillery. Sure, artillery, back in the day, if they hit you, they hurt. The penetration of this tank is 155 millimeters, 85 millimeters of pen and 950 damage. That is more damaging than pretty much tier 10 artillery now. But do you see what the aim time is like? Back in the day, you're literally talking about, look at the reticle. Look at the reticle all the way out. We're aiming, 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 we're aiming. And considering that you don't actually have very much splash radius, unless you were engaging people who was literally sitting still in the same location for maybe 10 or 20 seconds, you were unable to accurately shoot them. And if you fired early, you'd really have to just cross your fingers and hope to the gods that you got lucky. Otherwise, you'd be unable to hit them or do any kind of damage at all. And so I really feel that back in the day, artillery felt like they punished people who were sitting still for much longer. Whereas these days, artillery feels as if it's kind of reactionary and hitting fast open vehicles in the open, or alternatively managing to just shut down vehicles that are just reacting to them and punishing people who are making moves around between the different positions. Alright, one thing that's pretty funky here is that we managed to hit that T-52 on the move. He shuts down my artillery, but I'm hoping... Oh no! And he actually jukes me around the corner, but hopefully my T-52 is going to be able to handle it. Artillery, I have to admit, on the classic server, it does feel a lot more interesting to play. Probably because they're just so much more damaging, and it feels as if you're like a regular tank of importance on your team. And when you get into these situations, you're so much more dangerous at close range. Because obviously, while your aim time might be long at long range, when you're firing at point blank at tanks, you don't need to worry about things too much. I fire again and I miss the T-50. I am definitely not the most experienced piggy on our team. Nevertheless, we're going to have to see whether we can manage to make a comeback in this game. And this T50, luckily, is going for the T52 on my team. Slowly but surely, we're loading. And I figured out, why don't I just aim in third person? Surely that's going to be the thing that helps me more here. I wait for my T52 to get out the way, zero in, and shut down the light tank on the enemy team. But another contender rocks right up here. What do you guys think about the graphics of World of Tanks Classic? To be honest, obviously it doesn't have kind of, you know, high definition models. The textures are a little bit awkward, but really not too much has changed in 8 years, right? And nice shutdown there on the A20. Artillery definitely way more dangerous back in the day at short to mid ranges, and also against tanks that are completely sitting still. Talking about tanks that are completely sitting still, look at this T28 on the enemy team, the only tier 8 tank in the matchup. What a matchup for this guy. So I guess it's up to me really to hopefully be able to shut this guy down and protect the cap circle. If I don't manage to make the interrupt off now, we're not going to land it. But unfortunately, I fire blind, and that was a stupid move, as I should have waited for my T52 to spot. Nevertheless, my reload on this tank is not too bad, so I hopefully should be able to reload here to be able to shut down the T28. The T52 puts a shot in, and I'm going to hopefully try and fire at the front of this guy's tank, and because I don't have much splash radius, if I hit the side of his tank, it should not kill the T52 behind. And wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, as we shut down there the tier 8 non-turreted American tank destroyer on the enemy team. The T-28 was actually the second tank I ever managed to get a Kolobanov's medal in, I think, and 10 kills at the same time, because it just felt like back in the day that tanks' armor mattered more. Of course, this is just a subjective opinion, but I guess some of the statistics do back it up, that not everything felt like it had crazy penetration back in the day. And if you did manage to get caught out in the open, I guess there's still RNG in the game, and little derp guns like on this M5 Stuart were pretty gnarly. But it almost feels like on the test server that, well, when I call it a test server, it's the classic server really. When I get caught out in a heavy tank, that is not the end of the world. Sure, artillery is going to punish me if I sit still or I don't try and get behind an object to defend myself. But if it's just enemy tanks shooting me, I just seem to be able to last so much longer, and not every shot is dominating my vehicle. And some things in World of Tanks, I guess, really haven't changed, and that is light tanks just playing aggressively. But then again, I don't know. I mean, if I was playing this little vehicle these days, I'm not sure I could be just coasting around at 58 kilometers an hour. Now, one thing that's definitely... Oh, look at those physics. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, I went down the tiniest of little slopes, and you can't go over edges, because back in 0.7.0... there weren't even physics in the game to enable you to go over edges. And also, repair kits weren't reusable, so that's my only repair kit of this game. I have to get away from this T50. He's using some kind of freaky gun. And even though it's not doing that much damage to me, it sounds like all hell is breaking loose whenever he hits my tank. But yeah, I guess one of the things that's protecting me right now is just how dodgy the physics were back in the day. And we're driving around, and artillery doesn't have a crazy splash radius, so they have to hit me directly if they want to kill me, and they're not managing to do so as of yet. And the accuracy and all of this combined with just the engine just stop people from making accurate snipes. So it felt like everything was just more about movement and managing to get around and punishing people by outpositioning them. Whereas now I guess there's a lot more finesse in the actual shooting. And look at this, the artillery, they're just narrowly missing me and just doing practically nothing to me right now. And that allows us to shut down the M41 on the enemy team and trying to get the Su-76, but unable to do so. But I don't know. Is World of Tanks Classic better than regular World of Tanks? I think I'm going to have to wait to answer that in a whole different video. Give me a few days. The Classic server is running until Tuesday, and I've got to grind my way up the tech trees. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be back in the day, but it's still pretty darn bad. I think it's like 10 times easier, but when you think that I want to go up multiple tech trees at the same time, it's still an absolute pain in the butt. Luckily, Wargaming are going to give all of our accounts lots of free experience tomorrow and on Tuesday, and so I'm going to try and play a variety of the tanks that I want to before I really forge my opinion about would I rather play this game now, or more realistically, do I think that 0.7.0 was better for its time than update 1.4.1.1 is currently in 2019. One thing that I know for sure about is this trip down memory lane into the game that I fell in love with in 2011 has been a hell of a lot of fun. Although it also definitely shows that the game has come a lot way in a lot of other areas over the last 8 years. It also will definitely add clout to the argument of players wanting there to be a classic server the whole time. But whether that's going to be in Wargaming's interests, on the other hand, is another question. And really what I think Wargaming are trying to achieve with this classic test server is to evidently build up a bit of hype with all the people who maybe are no longer playing the game and they want to go back and live out their nostalgia. And then clearly they want to try and remind people that if you log into your main account, you've got a T-52 reward vehicle waiting for you, right? But on the other hand, I think there's definitely an element of Wargaming saying, is this really what you want the game to be like? Everybody constantly telling them how things were better back in the day. I think we're just going to have to wait for my next video where I discuss that one. Until then, I'm just going to continue having fun with the unnerfed Panzer IV, playing around with the KV-1S with that crazy 122mm, and also playing tanks like the KV-3 at tier 6, and playing tanks like the IS-4 at tier 9, as well as, of course, the fact that the KV can have the KV-2 turret at tier 5. Definitely not the best of balance, including the T-28 with the original 85mm, which now you have to kind of buy a premium tank to be able to get. Okay. Anyway, that's it for today, ladies and gents. I could go on for absolutely hours about this. Either way, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. But if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below what features you would like me to show off about the 0.7.0 classic server before it is retired on Tuesday. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, it's time for another World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, considering the AMX 50B is going to be top of the tree starting tomorrow, 1st of April, and that's not going to be a joke, I thought I would showcase the entirety of the auto-loading French heavy line so you can see if it's a line that's worth picking up, or alternatively, if you already have the tanks, maybe you can pick up a few tips and tricks along the way. So I'm really looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.